All right, okay, hello everyone. Very glad to have you join us for this live session today, hosted by Biomin. My name is Ryan Hines, I'm the Communications Manager, and today we're in this installment of the Biomin Antibiotic Reduction Experts series, we're going to talk about getting the most from your dairy cows with phytogenic feed additives. I'm joined by two Biomin experts, Dr. Tyler Turner and Dr. Wolfgang Markert. Tyler, hello to you.
Hello, everyone. Quick introduction of myself here. I'm originally from Canada. I've joined here Biomin for 2 years, primarily focusing on the ruminant gut performance portfolio with a focus on the phytogenic products in specific. Prior to that, I've been a global dairy specialist working for a different company for a number of years where we did a lot more hands-on, solution-orientated production system consulting and product placement, etc. So I'm happy to be here and looking forward to the presentation. Glad to have the audience. Wolfgang?
Okay, thanks a lot, Tyler. Yeah, my name is Wolfgang Markert. I'm a little bit longer in the Biomin group, since 10 years. Yeah. At the moment, I'm the technical market director of the region Europe. I have also support the sales with a team of different specialists, animal specialists, and I'm also happy to be here to show you a little bit what phytogenics are able to do with dairy cows. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, and we have our audience who is attentively listening. We're very glad to have you joining us today. Just one brief remark before we get started. This is an interactive session. If you, for those of you who are listening right now, that means two things. First, it means you can ask a question to Tyler or Wolfgang at any point during this session using the chat function in the GoToWebinar platform. Just type it in and we'll try to get to as many of those questions as we can during the dedicated question and answer session at the end of the prepared remarks. The second thing we're going to be able to do is get your opinions on a couple of the topics that we're discussing today around phytogenics and application in dairy cows. So we'll do that using audience questions. So please look for those opportunities for you to vote and to weigh in on those topics that we'll get to a bit later. So let's go ahead and get started. Tyler, we're going to start with you. If you would please bring us into this topic a little bit.
Okay, so let's start talking about something we're all familiar with. When we think of here we have, of course, our normal lactation curve and what we see in terms of body condition and our dry matter intake. When we think of the lactation challenges, the transition phase, of course, is a critical point that sets the tone for the entire lactation. And here we have a lot of challengings occurring at once with challenge severity linked to the duration the cows experience the negative energy balance. So during this duration, the duration can impact the peak milk yield and, of course, delay our rebreeding. However, managers also cannot ignore the stressors that can occur throughout the lactation that are affecting the persistency. For example, falling short of our predicted performance means cows in a group are having access to nutrients that are not being efficiently converted into milk, and this can lead to overconditioning, thus setting us up for greater challenges in the next lactation. How the cow copes with these stressors in the present lactation will impact the success of the next lactation and, of course, her longevity in the herd. So from this point, let's jump into our first poll question.
Absolutely, let's do so now. So our first poll question goes to you in the audience. I'm going to put this up on screen. When do you take active steps to manage stress challenges to improve herd performance? Be it in your own operation or if you're in a consulting function in others' operations. Please select the one best answer that fits your situation, either year-round throughout lactation and dry phase, in critical seasons, for example, during summer heat stress periods, only in early lactation, or never. The focus is on treating clinical disease. And we see that many of you have already jumped in and begun to share your views on this. We're going to display these answers in just a moment so that we can continue this discussion based on your input here. So we have more than half of our participants have voted. We're going to give it just another moment there, and we're going to close the poll. So thank you for everyone who's voted. Let me put those results up and read them out for you. So in terms of taking active steps to manage stress challenges to improve herd performance, we had half, 49%, say year-round throughout lactation and dry phase, 30% say in critical seasons, for example, during heat stress, 11% said only in early lactation, and another 11% said never. The focus is on treating clinical disease. Tyler, how does that response correspond to what you see in the field and among biomin customers?
Well, we did a multi-species survey earlier this autumn or last autumn, and we see pretty much the same, where the people are really understanding that stress, whether it is from whatever source, is impacting efficiency, and this needs to be dealt with. It's very good to see that our consultants, our salespeople are out there trying to and bring this information to the feed mills, to wider consultants, to the producers themselves, to help recognize where some of these stressors are. And that really brings me into the next slide, where we look at some of these stressors. As we know, in many day-to-day challenges, these stressors are not individually recognized, but they can create a compounding pressure on the animal. And this is the underlying causes leading to some of the clinical issues that we see. So in terms of feed management, of course, biomin emphasizes the importance of mycotoxin monitoring, but there's also other factors involved, such as the balancing of the ration, the TMR audits, and of course, feed bunk management. Pathogens, again, are a constant threat, with the vulnerability depending on the individual cow's resilience. Metabolic challenges are most often associated with the transition period, but as we mentioned before, miscalculations or poor bunk management can lead to repetitive bouts of subacute rumen acidosis, which we will discuss a little later. As we said in the poll, the heat stress is most often associated with environmental stress factor, but let's not forget the bed hygiene the cows are in. It should be dry, should be cool, and of course our milk parlor management can also constitute environmental factors impacting the cow, creating stressors. And of course, last, most probably the least recognized, is the social stresses that are often affecting the most vulnerable animals at the beginning of the lactation. We see the weaker animals being more severely affected, and this can range from animals having adequate bunk space or even just flight space to be able to move away when they're faced with confrontation. These factors all account for some unseen challenges facing the cow throughout her lactation. As we bring the focus here back to transition for a little closer look at the multiple factors that are occurring around the calving, the main point is this drop in immune status. It's coinciding with a sharp rise in inflammation and this more prolonged oxidative stress. During this period, decreasing dry matter intake, sharp changes in diet composition, shifts in microbiota, and general fermentation disruption, as well as the concurrent fat mobilization, are all characteristics of this period. Cumulatively, we are seeking the ideal balance against the pro-inflammatory and the anti-inflammatory or supporting factors. But is this an impossible dream? Most likely it is. However, we can take steps to minimize the stressors where we can to help the animal helping themselves through preventative management and nutritional steps. Taking a closer look at the enhanced vulnerability around calving and owing to the depressed immune system, we know that low dry matter intake and the heightened energy demand stimulates this mobilization of fat pre-calving, which then, of course, peaks after calving. This mobilization of body fat is linked to the cow's immune response, where we see increased non-esterified fatty acids, heightening the inflammatory expression by enhancing the NF-kappa B linked cytokine response. What this causes is a noted impediment of the neutrophil function, so the animal's ability to respond to inflammation. Now, I'm not saying that all inflammation is bad. Limited inflammation is good. This is a response to help the animal recover post-calving, for example, uterine contraction to ward off metritis risk. It's one of the benefits post-calving. What we're focusing on is mitigating the extreme senses, where we see here in this study where they followed the outcome of the animals up to 100 days in milk based on their heptoglobulin and acute phase protein right around this calving site. So as you see here, those that were expressing higher levels of heptoglobulin had more severe inflammation and had more severe outcome in the lactation, being it reduced performance or even being removed from the herd. What we're looking for is supporting the animal for rapid resolution to limit its metabolic disorders. So where does this leave us in terms of preventive solutions? At this point, I would like to introduce digesterone dairy. It's a phytogenic feed additive as a corrective preventative management solution. To begin with, for those of our listeners that are not familiar with phytochemicals and phytogenic feed additives the phytochemicals represent a natural source of bioactive compounds, as well acknowledging some of these compounds can be synthesized or be nature-like. The phytochemicals themselves are known for a wide range of bioactivities to bolster the immune resilience, such as anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties, as well as having antimicrobial properties. But it's important to note that not all phytochemicals have the same function. The structures vary a lot, and this structure dictates how the molecule can interact with various receptors, either on bacteria cells or tissue cells, to express their bioactive effects.
Great. So if we can, let's go ahead and...
Not quite yet.
Please.
The phytogenic feed additives themselves take these specific phytochemicals, combining them for specific purpose with the aim of improving the animal's well-being and performance. Again, this can be from whole plants, herbs, non-volatiles, volatiles, or specific compounds. The objective being to find the right combination with a variety of compounds, broadening the bioactive spectrum of the product. So now, please, now we can go to the next poll question.
Excellent. Let's do so right now. So you've given us a nice overview of phytogenic feed additives. Let's turn to our audience now. Why don't you tell us, what's your exposure, your experience with the phytogenics in terms of ruminant production? Do you have good experience? You regularly use or recommend regular inclusion of phytogenic feed additives in production? You have used them generally, but only use them in certain phases or when in certain circumstances. You have heard of them and potentially interested in potential application, but have not used them, or you've never heard of and never used phytogenic feed additives for ruminant production. We see that everyone is even quicker now to participate in this poll, so it's very encouraging to see that. We're going to get to the results in just a moment. With more than half of our audience voting, we're going to go ahead and close the poll so we can proceed with our discussion. But before we do so, I want to read out those results for everyone, and I'll put them up on screen once more. 33% have good experience and regularly apply phytogenic feed additives in the diets. 25% have used, but generally include only in certain phases. 25% are interested, and 18% have never heard of nor used phytogenic feed additives. There's some interesting findings there. And Tyler, once again, I'll ask you to comment. Is that what you tend to see in the ruminant industry?
Well, that's actually very exciting. For the most part, the rumen application of phytogenics in ruminant production is lagging behind popularity or application in terms of our monogastric species like poultry, swine, and aquaculture. But it is good to see, as there is being a huge body of research that has been produced in the last 10, 15 years, focusing on this question particular because of the successes we've seen in monogastric production. So that is a good positive sign that we're moving in this direction, and we can see a lot more potential for application in the future.
Excellent. And let me just jump in there with one audience question here. Tyler, I think you're going to get to this in your next portion of your remarks, but Muhammad asks, what is the fate of these phytogenics when they enter the rumen? And I believe that the effects of these phytogenics will probably be something you touch on now.
Okay. So as a brief overview of the digestrum dairy, it is a natural solution to improve nutrient utilization. As we know, the phytogenics as a feed additive are often classed by regulatory bodies as a flavoring additive, and this is rightly so given the source ingredients. Now, digestrum dairy itself is comprised of a synergistic blend of the essential oils and non-volatile extracts from herbs and spices. But when we think more along the modes of action, this moves towards the modifying or augmenting the gastrointestinal microbiota, reducing sub-inflammatory process, and ensuring gastrointestinal integrity. Together, this is bringing that better animal performance. As we said, intake is a component. It relates to the acceptance, hence flavoring can contribute, but possibly more importantly, that if an animal is feeling well, it's going to eat to capacity. However, there's more to the phytogenic line than just flavoring as we are speaking, as we're looking for the interactions with the microbiota or cellular receptors, leading to our positive effects on the whole system. And this is where the animal is feeling fit, so to speak, and there we're getting to optimum production. Mohammed, to answer your question, from our own experience with Rusatech models, we see that we have good recovery of the phytogenics 24 hours after incubation. This means they are leaving the rumen, and they are still expressing their actions later on to help the gastrointestinal integrity and functionality. So with ruminants, of course, rumen being our major touch point, but we also know that they are passing through to the rest of the animal. So when we think of the effects of the whole, direct or indirect influence on intake, it plays a factor, as we mentioned. However, it's pointing out the bioactivity of the phytogenic compounds interacting with the rest of the animal physiology, including the host microbiota. Considering the complexity surrounding gut health, the main modes of actions or bioactive properties can be listed, such as rumen and digestive secretions, gastral microbiota modulation, gastrointestinal integrity and functionality, and liver function. These all pay off in the well-being and the efficiency of productivity. So as we know, a healthy animal, of course, stays longer in the herd, and this is one of our goals from Biomin and, of course, DSM, a touch pillar, where we're looking for greater efficiency and sustainability in our livestock production. Now we know, for looking specifically at oxidative and inflammatory factors, a lot of stressors can induce oxidative stress. Even high metabolic rates is producing oxidative stress. This is leading to the activation of the pro-inflammatory substances mediated by the NF-kappa B and eliciting different chemokine activation. This leads to recruitment of inflammation cells, and the inflammation process again results in production of even more reactive oxygen species. This again stimulates the oxidative stress, and it clearly starts a downward spiral. As part of feeling fit for the animals, it helps the animal cope better with the stress factors. This is where the phytogenics come into play, like such as progesterone dairy. This can help bolster the animal's resilience, thus disrupting this damaging cycle, either by mitigating the stress factor or aiding in the recovery process, thus faster return to what would be considered normal. Using events in pre-calving and colostrum production as an example, we know during the dry period phase, this starts at dry off. We have utter involution, then a steady state, and then tissue rejuvenation. We know from studies there are a number of factors that have a negative impact on colostrum quality, as the tissue rejuvenation is, of course, a taxing phase. As we've listed here, short periods, inadequate nutrition, heat stress, of course, these are all negative impacting. As we also look on positive aspects, we note that lactation number, of course, has a positive general impact on IgG levels in colostrum owing to local pathogen exposure and adaptation. In general, colostrum volume has a low correlation, meaning there's high individual variation regardless of lactation number. Our focus is optimizing on the IgG concentration of what will be delivered to the calf. On the management action side, of course, we know adequate dry period length, the nutrition, the age of the dam, vaccinations, and mitigating out external stress factors such as heat stress are all areas of positive influence. But we haven't explored sufficiently about helping the cow to navigate these challenging times. Here we have our results from a study from the US where we looked at that specifically. In this herd, it was 2,600 animals, and what we are doing is measuring the colostrum quality using an electronic Brix meter and feeding the digesterone dairy in the close-up period pre-calving. This was a 3-week period on this farm. What we see overall is a positive influence on the cows producing good quality colostrum. At the herd level, this is a 5% increase. I also want to draw your attention to that the fact the greatest benefits were coming in the second parity animals. It's often these second parity animals often experience a so-called sophomore slump. Here we saw the greatest benefits, suggesting that these animals are in the greatest need of support. So when we ask ourselves, well, why is this important? Well, taking a look at our situation using information from an American survey, in large operations, meaning 500 animals or more, only about 50% of the producers check colostrum quality. So that's a pretty big gamble if that calf is receiving adequate colostrum or not. This number decreased on medium-sized farms, that 100 to 500 animal range, where only 15% were using colostrum meters. On the smaller farms, which may be more typical in some of our European countries, having less than 100 in the lactating herd, this was virtually void. This controlling the colostrum quality is a good control point for calf health and well-being. And in this situation, it would also suggest the cows are being more fit leading up to calving. How that impacts us in terms of what we're delivering to the calf. From a practical spectrum, this colostrum from these cows can boost the amount of IgGs being delivered to the calf by 7% in a normal dose application. And we know that a healthier calf is going to have a more productive pre-weaning period, bringing them closer to the ideal breeding time. And this, of course, good health impacts our first lactation performance. This is a good starting work in an area that we need to follow up on to look at, of course, passive transfer success and post-calf calving success. So it's an exciting area of further research. When we look at a different study where we monitored just the performance of the cows in that early lactation, we know that they're having a positive performance. This is owing to better glucose availability. As we know, in the transition period, you're either going to be fighting against that inflammation, which of course will take priority for glucose utilization, or we're going to be going towards milk production and activating those mammary glands. So what we see here is positive influence on milk production suggests our inflammation has been reduced. We've enhanced our glucose supply, and that is giving us our increase in milk yield. Of course, our higher peak yield would also suggest a better state, lending to better fertility and more stable lactation persistency throughout. Our key goal in this early lactation period, of course, is getting the cows to eat more and chew more and ruminating more. I'd also like to note in this section that early lactation is known to be the highest incidence of other health challenges and treatments. Based on field experience feedback, they indicated that cows requiring treatment for only mild udder problems, those on digesterone dairy had a 2 times higher likelihood of recovering after a single treatment. Again, this is good area for further research, an area where we need to continue with studies and in-field observations. Looking at our scientific background on the product itself is a major trial undertaken here at the University of Vienna in combination with industry partners, focusing on the situation where they've induced SARA conditions. Now, this investigation was looking at rumen motility, chewing activity, and how we can help mitigate those, or how we can mimic the conditions experienced in early lactation and mitigate the challenges that are experienced. These trials were involving using dry fistulated cows in order to collect the additional samples that we took, but the application is still valid in the terms that the animals were challenged by SARA conditions and monitoring the pH in the rumens. So what we have here, this red line, we're not looking at specifically how low the pH was, but it's the duration the pH was below pH of 6 during the day. In this challenge, we saw that the initial challenge elicited the strongest response, and that is where I'll focus the discussion. However, even in the second challenge, even though the response was dampened, we see a positive effect of the digesterone dairy in this phase. So under these challenge conditions, what we know from transition diets, we're introducing more non-fiber carbohydrates, we're increasing that risk of SARA exposure, and we're potentially starting a rumen pH roller coaster that will impact our intake as well as stimulating inflammatory catalysts. In comparison to the control under these conditions, we saw that the digesterone dairy group was enhancing rumination, enhancing the boli introduction. This means more eructation, a lot more physical chewing, breaking down the fibers, and introducing more ensalivation or saliva production. And this saliva production, of course, enhances our buffering capacity to help mitigate this roller coaster I was talking about. In the rumen microbiota itself, we know that the rumen under normal conditions, the substrate flexibility is very flexible to different substrates. It is robust recovery regardless of the challenge, yet little is understood. Main point though, under SARA conditions, we see a general shift to low pH thriving bacteria. These are generally gram-negative bacteria that are amylytic or starch digesters. Under these challenge conditions with the digesterone dairy, we better help maintain the diversity We saw better rumen efficiency. And if we look down this Christmas tree of coloring, some of our stronger gram-negative populations, for example, did not see the proliferation. We did not see the proliferation of the hyperammonia-producing bacteria that typically accompany a lower pH situation. What benefits do we usually see from a more neutral rumen pH? Well, we'll have more microbial synthesis. This, of course, will aid in ammonia capture. This also enhances microbiota activity. This aids in our short chain or volatile fatty acid production. And we see a higher acetate butyrate to propionate ratio. Generally, also in the higher fiber neutral diets, we see an enhancement of the archaea populations. These are associated with fiber digestion and, of course, methane production. But this also works to help enhance starch digestion in the rumen, thus helping reduce the bypass of the starch into the hindgut, where it can cause greater challenges or sloughing off of the mucosae, which we see as in mucus casts. Under our SARA condition challenge here, what we saw in the terms of the short chain volatile fatty acids, we did see numerically increased numbers. This is owing to the fact that we saw enhanced butyrate production, and we didn't see a big shift in our propionate acetate cycles. We just kept a overall higher volume. So in the end, we saw that we had more butyrate, we saw less lactic acid production, and we saw less ammonia. You can read about the full study here in the Journal of Dairy Science from Neubauer's publication in 2018. Continuing on with what is happening with the gram-negative bacteria. Of course, gram-negative bacteria have something in their structure called lipopolysaccharides. These lipopolysaccharides are known to enhance the inflammation response. They're catalysts to release biogenic amines, such as the histamine, which we're most familiar with. But biogenic amines in general, these were isolated from a rumen fluid, and they're mostly associated with reducing rumen motility, which of course would reduce our chewing factor. They've been associated with decreased dry matter intake and associated with enhanced rumen epithelial inflammation. Situation with digestion dairy under these SARA challenge conditions was a threefold lower level of histamine, as well as seeing reductions in nilethamine and pyridine in our system. So overall, a positive mitigating response. We look at an overall summary of that study selection. We're increasing the chewing and rumen activity, and this, of course, will come back to enhancing the animal's overall intake, which is really our driving force. We want the animals to eat more of a balanced TMR rather than trying to adapt the TMR for limited amount of intake, which would start that roller coaster more aggressively. We saw our ruminal pH value was better stabilized or mitigated during the challenge conditions, and we had a positive impact on the bacterial communities in the rumen by decreasing the release of, or by decreasing that shift to gram-negative bacteria, which would elicit lipopolysaccharide release and stimulate the biogenic amine stressors. On a positive note, of course, we saw enhanced butyrate concentration. This is very important during that transition phase where we are trying to redevelop the rumen walls to absorb nutrients. The butyrate, of course, will help the epithelial grow. And of course, we reduced our hyperammoniating producing bacteria species, so we saw less ammonia losses. All in all, a very positive direction or indication of how to help manage these systems by helping support the animal better. If we look at a broader spectrum on the entire lactation, once we get through once we get to peak lactation, we still have the challenges that are facing the animal throughout the lactation from a number of factors, such as nutrients, environments, group challenges that social stress is talking about. This, of course, limits the glucose supply as it's being used for the inflammatory system, and that has a negative effect of our drying off our secretion cells too early. End result is we fall away from our predicted persistency curve. These animals now have access to higher energy diets than necessary, and we see those fat animals. Our goal is to maintain this healthy plateau so we have a more structured and controlled dry off. Coming back to experience we've had with digesterome in the field, looking at crossover trial design so that we had both sets of groups of animals under both treatments to control the statistics. Here we see in the mid-lactation that these animals were able to better maintain their persistency. And when post-peak, that's really what we're looking for, is milk persistency, milk solids, and focusing on the udder health. When I talk about the combination of the rumen function overall well-being, we see a positive impact on performance. Here we're looking at a selection of short-term mid-lactation trials where we see a positive influence on our milk solids and an overall positive influence on our energy-corrected milk. Now, of course, the individual results by farm can vary depending on the diets and the situation. And of course, as we demonstrated by starting early in the dry period, the full benefits come from feeding the product throughout the lactation to manage in response to the stressors that are present. Beyond looking at just the milk yield, we also look at our efficiency and the performance of the animals. We're looking at improving the well-being, and this can be then indirectly measured by the efficiency of the feed intake and milk production, with, of course, more nutrients going towards production. As we see here, improved efficiency not only is enhancing the income over feed cost in terms of yield milk per feed cost, this is contributing to the viability of the operation, but it also, as we are talking about the main pillars for global sustainability, their better utilization of the natural resources. This is something we have very in common with our parent company, DSM, where we're looking at reducing the overall carbon footprint caused by animal production. And this is also suggesting better animal welfare and well-being, which will undoubtedly have a positive impact on the cow herd and the longevity. So that was rather short and sweet overview, but to summarize, when we're thinking of our early lactation and our potential for SARA challenges, we see that the animals are ruminating more. We see better rumen motility. This is leading to better rumen function, higher intake, and this will help reduce our negative energy period challenges. This should also potentially lead to higher peak lactation, barring other factors involved, and of course, helping the animals handling the stress challenges better pre and post calving for a smoother lactation. Touching on mid-lactation persistency, we are stabilizing the lactation cycles. We've seen this through better efficiency in milk production, better udder health, and better longevity in the secretion cells, and we're maintaining the intake during these diet challenges or stress challenges as we're seeing when we exposed to a SARA situation. When component pricing terms, this more milk solids and higher energy corrected milk, of course, puts more money back in the producer's hands. Now I'll turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Wolfgang Markert, to touch more on the practical application aspects of the product application. Wolfgang, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah, not a problem.
Okay,
Thanks a lot, Tyler, for your introduction to the product. And I will take a little bit how it
have now
functions.
control, yes?
Yeah. How I move it.
It's just a delay in the transfer of control. There you go.
I believe you're still on the highlighter, perhaps. It may hinder advancing the slides.
Ah,
There
now
we
it's
are.
working.
Perfect.
Sorry. So now I'm inside. Yeah. If I now ask the question, when is the best time to use a phytogenic feed additive? You know, the part of lactation of a cow is different. We have the transition period starting with the close-up period and also fresh and early lactation period. And then we have the middle and the late part. Yeah? And from my side, it's very important to say that the Digosarum dairy we can use in all parts of the life of a lactation cow. And you see a little bit here the different situations. So we can use Digosarum dairy in the first part in the transition period with 3 grams. Yeah. And you see there also the positive aspects. Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit a repetition of Tyler's presentation. What we saw in scientific trials and also in field trials. Yeah. I will go a little bit more in details. Yeah. If I go now in the transition period, so it starts with a close-up up to 80 days, I would say the best way is to go with 3 grams per cow per day, Digosarum dairy. We have a good experience there in practical farms, yeah, over the world. So it means also in Europe and also in other countries like US, yeah, or North America. And you see there also the positive results. So we have an inflammation reduction. We know inflammation is a big problem in the transition period. We know that we really can reduce that. And the best example is the biogenamines at the first moment. We are at the moment in the scientific, I would say, trials to prove also that we have a direct effect on the inflammation reduction. Yeah? That will come in the near future. Yeah? We see also from this trial in Vienna that we have an improvement in the feed intake. Very important in the transition period, also to reduce the ketotic situation and also to make sure that we get the whole milk out of the cow. Yeah? Clear, that's also very important, glucose mobilization. Yeah? We saw this also really good in some trails. Yeah? We have done in North America, and what's also improved the milk yield. Yeah? Reduce also the problems with ketotic situation, and also improve really the health of the cow. We saw also the rumen and gut microbiota modulation. So we shift a little bit more to a benefit, yeah, for the rumen and gut microbiota. And also clear, we also reduce the SARA duration, yeah, with the Digosarum dairy. A big problem if you feed high concentrate rations, yeah, and that it's also clear that we have there a big benefit also for the health, and also that you have not to cull some cows after 1 or 2 lactations. Yeah. Also, last not least, we modulate the voluntary fatty acid. So you see there also their benefit in glucose, yeah, because we need the glucose directly, and we have the butyrate and propionate relationship there. And that is also really the biggest benefit also if we really, with the gut microbiota modulation and with the modulation of the voluntary fatty acid. And very important, and that it's also a message, don't forget the dry period. Yeah? There is the most important part also to start there with a phytogenic product, like Digocerom dairy. In the middle, it's clear the efficiency of a phytogenic product is a little bit different than in the transition period. Yeah? And the most important part is the persistency. Yeah? We see that in some trials also in Europe, that we see there really more milk over in the middle and late lactation that make the really the economic aspect very high to use it. Yeah? Clear, we have more milk solids, so you get more money for the milk. Yeah? End of the day, and also rumen and gut microbiota is stable, and also very important, we maintain the feed intake. Yeah, so there is not an overcrowding in the feed intake that the cows will be fat. Yeah? So they eat more in the relation to the milk yield. So where we can use the Digocerom dairy, we have two big groups. That's you or somebody else as a feed producer. Yeah, you cannot do that in a concentrate. Yeah, you need there also some special products. 1 kg special complementary feeds. Yeah, especially for the transition period or for the fresh period for farms who are able to feed different concentrates. Yeah, not only one. Yeah, so they are also for robots farms, yeah, where you can feed 2 or more different products. There's the chance to place such a product with a Digocerom dairy inside. Yeah, clear nutritional. Don't forget that you need also a good ration calculation. Yeah? And what you put there inside. Yeah, what is the minimum what you need? That could be also amino acids, whatever, protected one. And that is also a very important part. Yeah? Don't forget it. And the other part is also more in the European countries is the mineral feed producers. Yeah? They can use special mineral feeds for dry, transition, and fresh periods. And also you can put it as a standard in mineral feeds for all cows. Yeah? That's easy to do. Yeah? And there is also the benefit. The costs are also, I would say, the ROI to use Digocerom dairy is in this direction not the big effect here, but brings you back some money at the end of the day. So also very important, if we feed a phytogenic product like Digocerom dairy, you can also use some other products together. Yeah? They could be complementary, yeah, to the use of phytogenic products. Yeah? And there I have some examples what could be positive also for your customers. That could be autolyzed yeast. Yeah? We have also a product in our portfolio, Leverbond rumen there, and we have positive results to combine those products in really practical farms. Yeah? They are really complementary, and in the Vienna study, we have tested both products at the same time, and we see they're really the complementary mode of action of both products. Also, I will not say live yeast is better or worse like autolyzed yeast, but if you use a live yeast, you can also use that as a product together with the phytogenics. Yeast extracts, the same. Yeah? And please don't forget that. Yeah? We have very good examples also to combine also phytogenic product with mycotoxin deactivators, like we have in with Mycofix in our portfolio. That's a little bit, I would say, my part, yeah, a shorter part, but I want to bring you more the application of the product, what you can do with the product, to give you some ideas in the direction to use a phytogenic product like diglycerol dairy. Thanks a lot from my side. And now I think, Ryan, you're looking for some questions.
This is a great time. Thank you, Wolfgang, for bringing those practical and application-oriented insights to us, and Tyler for bringing the science and the explanation of digesterone dairy to the table. I would, of course, invite everyone to submit questions if you have them, because we are now opening the Q&A session. We're going to use the remainder of our hour here to tackle some of those. So let's go ahead and get started with our first one. We've heard talk about the various benefits of digesterone dairy, more money. Can we just recap that point again, because it is really important for producers? Where do the economic benefits come from? Are we talking about top line improvement? Are we talking about cost savings? I believe I heard something about milk quality. In a nutshell, where is this extra money coming from?
Okay, for topping on that, yes, in our short term, you see the improvements in our milk solids, energy corrected milk. Of course, that's in the mid-lactation herd. If you were to start earlier and follow these animals all the way through the lactation, that's where the true benefit of the product comes out, where we see these peak lactation being higher due to better fitness of the animal, and that will contribute to both your fertility, your udder health, and your longevity. So that's economic-wise will differ by country depending on what sort of situation you're starting from and the challenges you're facing. So I can't give a direct number. However, in our general overview here, we're seeing well above a 3-to-1 return.
Yeah, very important. The longevity. That's, I think, the most important part, but it's not easy to prove that in practice. I would like to have some trails in this direction, but I think with a phytogenic product, you are on the way to increase the longevity of some cows.
All right, thank you for that. In terms of, here's a very practical question, right? In terms of packaging, of what units are available, right? Is this for any size farm or operation? Where does the entry level in terms of herd size, that it makes sense to start with digesterone dairy?
Our general product that we're selling out to the feed mills, of course, we are targeting consultants and feed mills to deliver a highly concentrated product that is again mixed into either mineral or the specialty supplements that could be fed over robot transponder or just generally mixed in. The option for a diluted product is coming, but it is a challenge, of course, to get into all of the farms. So we like to bring the information to our feed millers and specialty feed providers and work with them to help producers in that sense.
All right, absolutely. So something to look forward to in the future. So talk to your feed supplier in that case. Great. Taking our next question as we go down the list. So when you begin to apply digesterone dairy, as a producer, what sort of short-term observations are you going to see? What sort of changes in terms of the animal would it be fair to expect? Perhaps Wolfgang, you can.
Yeah, short term, it's a little bit hard to see. Clear, you see perhaps, I would say, depending from ration to ration, you see a stabilization of the feed intake. And you see also, I would say, a smooth increase of the milk solid. That it's happening, but you have to be sure that you have, if you have a milk control, that you observe after 4 weeks, then a slight increase in milk yield, and also in the energy corrected milk.
Exactly, as more of the herd comes online with the product through their full lactation, this curve steadily rises.
Great. Thank you both for that. Tyler, I want to get back to your comments about colostrum quality and the fact that this is something that producers may overlook. That it's not necessarily measured on a regular basis. You've started down on the reasons for doing so, for measuring colostrum quality. Tell us a bit more about that. What does it involve in terms of getting set up? How easy is it to do? When should you start doing that sort of thing?
Of course, for any consulting group there, we know it's fairly simple. The instruments that are available on the market are either simple refractometers, where you can take a sample of fresh colostrum. They're now thermal, how to say this, thermal compensated, so that you can take a direct fresh sample and look at it directly through the refractometer. Or you get more sophisticated machines such as these electronic refractometers. Again, a simple dab of colostrum is sufficient to make these measurements. This is really targeting towards the move that producers will be using the colostrum banks, so that they are selecting the highest quality colostrum to keep, and then they're applying these back to the calves. As a general rule, the producers disregard the first lactation colostrum with the assumption that it's not sufficient, but as you saw in that early table, in certain situations, the colostrum quality is sufficient to meet our benchmark of the 22%. However, you don't know that unless you test. So we strongly encourage producers moving towards measuring, storing in colostrum banks, and applying back to the calves. As a point of that presentation or situation, we're really focusing back on how did we influence the colostrum quality. We know the things that have negative impacts, and it's very difficult to find things that have positive impact. Yet here, by helping the animals either through immune support or better well-being, we are seeing that this colostrum quality was improved. And that's something significant to look at and think about how that has a larger impact, not only on that cow, but also her calf. What happened in utero? Did we have a positive influence on the calf in utero? Have we enhanced the colostrum absorbance of the calf? All of these things will require further in-depth scientific evaluation to be certain. And of course, given the high variability of ruminants, we're going to need repeated trials and a large number of animals. It's just the nature of ruminant production.
So, any thoughts to add to that, Wolfgang?
No, I think Tyler explained that a lot, yeah, and very exciting. And it's clear if we improve the colostrum quality, it shows really the benefit of to use a phytogenic product, yeah, because with a good colostrum, the life of a cow starts. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Great. Let me introduce one final question as we come to the end of our time together today. This time for Tyler. We've got an interest here in digesterone. What is it that makes it different? What's in digesterone? What separates it from many of the other phytogenic products that are out there on the market?
Well, with the BioMin, we don't have one phytogenic blend for all species. We know that chickens are different than pigs, and of course, monogastrics are different than the ruminants. We are working to work with the rumen itself, and in this respect, we have to consider that rumen motility, regurgitation. You have to have something that appeals to the animals. And of course, we are focusing on working with the microbiota. If we were to take something that is highly antimicrobial, of course, we could kill all the rumen microbiota, but that's not our objective. We want to maximize our functioning rumen, and this is a delicate balance where you really need to look at the combination of different ingredients to be at the right balance and application to not overdo it. As a colleague of mine from the aqua sessions has pointed me, the medicine can quickly become a poison depending on the amount that is included. So here it is, following the guidelines and adjusting according to the challenge needs without overdoing it. So that's what is unique about the Digesterome dairy. We haven't had any reason to encapsulate the product. For me, encapsulation would suggest we have an acceptance issue, whether it is by the animal itself or when they're, say, for example, eructating, regurgitating, that flavor is then back in the mouth of the animal and could turn them off of feed intake. And that's, of course, what we are working against. We want the animal to eat the most of the balanced ration as possible to maximize our performance.
Right. Thank you for that. So that's going to do it for today's session. Tyler, thank you again for bringing the science and insights about Digesterome dairy to us and our audience. Wolfgang, likewise, for the application and practical tips regarding the use of Digesterome dairy and additional feed additives to support dairy cows. It's been great having you both, having to see you. We had a great connection in terms of internet, so very glad that this went off smoothly. I want to thank our live audience for your attention, for your great questions. And if you have any more interest in following up about Digesterome dairy, how it can apply to you wherever you are in the world, please contact your Biomin representative. I'll ask you just one favor as you leave our session today, as we close our webinar. Please go ahead and use a minute or two to give us a feedback on your experience here. If you are happy with the session, if you're interested in this topic, if you'd like to hear other topics in the future, it's a short questionnaire that is going to pop up on your screen as soon as we close, and that helps us as we continue this antibiotic reduction expert series, which has been running for nearly 12 months now. It's always great to see you. So thank you again, Wolfgang and Tyler. Thank you to our audience. On behalf of Biomin, have a great day.
Thanks a lot, Ryan and Tyler.
Pleasure being here with you guys. Looking forward to hearing more from the audience if they have additional questions.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you all.
Thank you all.